I want to avoid doing that thing that hockey guy does.
Oh, what's that?
Whine and beg people to like the sport. But I do have a question about the Stanley Cup. We'll get to it later this hour, plus the cookie jar. John, the conversation right now is about the Lions. All the questions about this football team with the offseason. Do you still expect them to be a top 5 offense?
I say yes.
And I say no. And we leave it up to you guys to decide. 248-539-9797.
Greg, what say you?
Now, John, you made a very astute observation about the Lions' schedule and how it relates to this ranking system, that they're going to be playing 7 teams, 8 games, because
against top 5 offense or top 10 offenses.
And yet Jim has them winning, I believe 12 games is the
updated, tally.
Mm-hmm.
So to play and beat these high-powered offenses, how do you suppose the Lions will do that?
Greg, I think they'll have to score some points.
And will they not themselves have to be a top 5 offense to do that?
Not necessarily.
They could beat the Giants 100-0, sure.
But I think you got to understand, last year they were the number 1 offense by running up the score. And I'm not blaming them for it. The other team's job is to stop them. Nobody could stop the Lions. I don't foresee them scoring the way they did a year ago. I think they're coming back down to earth. I think that was going to happen with Frank Ragnow. Now I take out that piece, and I have them behind other offenses who are very good. I mean, John, Buffalo and Baltimore and Tampa were top 5 offenses a year ago, and they're not replacing a Frank Ragnow.
Well, Tampa is replacing a coordinator.
From within, and this will be their 3rd coordinator in 3 years, and it hasn't slowed down Baker. They added Ibuka from Ohio State. Godwin will be healthy. They actually have a center with some experience in Barton because they drafted one ahead of time.
So it's not an issue for them to replace a coordinator, but it's an issue for us to replace a coordinator.
I have not made this about Ben Johnson. I've made this about Frank because I really did feel like, to Ben Johnson's point, it was turnkey. Then you don't have your center, and it's a different conversation. I'd have the Lions somewhere between 6 and 8, one of the 10 best offenses in football, and leaving the door open for them to become a top 5 offense. But as I sit here today with the questions up front, I would leave them behind Buffalo and Baltimore and Tampa. Philadelphia should be ahead of Detroit right now offensively, led by their offensive line. And then Washington. I'd have all 5 of those teams ahead of the Lions right now.
So they're at 6.
Yeah, right around there.
Kind of splitting hairs there, aren't you? I know that 6 is out of the top 5.
I said somewhere between 6 and 8. I mean, we could sit here and fight about more. I think they're better than Green Bay, even with the center questions. They'll be the best offense in this division. I still think they're winning the division, but I don't think they're better than the teams ahead of them. Anyway, 248-539-9797. We'll get some of those thoughts in the mix. Ticket, text, and phone calls. Texter says they feel that the Bills are too high, and they don't think the Bucs are in the top 5 either.
So the Bucs is an interesting one because you look at what they did last year, and this was, 5 weeks without Mike Evans. They lost Godwin at the end of the year. They finished as a number 4 scoring offense in the NFL last year.
Hard to argue that they're a top 5 offense.
When all the components are back and healthy. The question is how long can Mike Evans be Mike Evans? Like it's remarkable what he's been able to do. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And
you think so?
Oh yeah. For what he's been able to do. Now I know, there's been some good years, right? They've won a Super Bowl. There's been some down years, but he's always been that guy that's been highly productive.
The only reason I was pushing back at all is wide receivers a really crowded position, and just because someone should get in on the first ballot
doesn't mean they will. Yeah. But I think he's that type of talent. Depends who else is eligible at, when he retires. But I did raise an eyebrow to Tampa when I saw them as high as they were, but then you start digging into what they were last year, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. Do I think the Lions offense will be better? Yes, and mainly because of the 1-2 punch out of the backfield. And some might come down to how much of a back seat do they make David Montgomery take, and how much more do they feature Jahmyr Gibbs?
I don't think they will. I think the plan, and in the regular season especially, is to get both those guys to the finish line
healthy,
minimizing wear and tear. They're going to run the ball a lot, so you're going to want to share the rock. Now, when you get to the playoffs, you let Gibbs out of the cage. He's the more dangerous dynamic back. We talked a lot about that a year ago. I know that's one of people's biggest complaints from the start of that playoff game against the Commanders. Texture says the Lions were 5th in points and 4th in yards the year they fired Anthony Lynn and Campbell called plays while going 9-8. Yes, they will stay in the top 5 even with these changes. Mm-hmm. Ragnow, of course, is a big piece, but one player will not uproot the entire offense. Brad knew Ragnow was on the way out. They will move our young bucks around to ensure and provide coverage. Definitely top 5 offense. Run, play action, pass, repeat, Brad in a truck. Well, I want to push back. They're not replacing one player on the offensive line. They're replacing 2. 2 starters from last year's offensive line are being replaced. Both in the middle. Both where pressure could really mess up Jared Goff.
Could, yes.
Yes, could, John.
Could,
yes. I didn't watch the games yet. They have to happen still.
Right.
But it would be likely.
I like the fact that they have players that could step up and play. Is whoever they put at center, is he going to play like Frank Ragnow? No, not going to. But I would push back in regards to where Kevin Zeitler was last year and where he might be with another year of aging, that maybe a Tate Ratledge, there's going to be things that maybe he doesn't do as well. Experience is not going to be there. But as a young player, as a mobile young player, there might be more things that this offense will be able to do. Maybe they pull the guard a little bit more versus, in the run game versus maybe they were limited in pulling Kevin Zeitler, especially late in the season when he's a little dinged up.
Fair. It says no way they'll be top 5. They'll be in the teens. Jansen ran the offense to Goff's weaknesses. More pressure will get to Goff. It's going to be a rough year. Now, I'm not doing the doomsday stuff like that, but I do think Jared Goff is going to be in for a bit of an awakening without Frank.
Could.
Antoine in Detroit, how you doing?
Hello.
What's up?
Hey, I think we are not just the top 5. I think we are up in there with Baltimore and Tampa Bay and Buffalo.
So you think it could be not just top 5, but top 3?
I feel we get to play against, we don't get Buffalo, but we get Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
We get Baltimore. We're going to see this year. I mean, I know we got Baltimore on the road. That's been Jared Goff's Achilles heel. But the team knew, the organization knew that Frank Ragnow, it was a potential that he might call it quits this year.
Yeah.
I believe that Dan and Brad was up on that already. That's why they was playing them young boys last year, getting them time in, getting them experience, getting them seasonal. So I don't feel there's going to be a big drop-off from our losing Ragnow.
But how can you say that? How can you say it's not going to be a big drop-off losing one of the 2 best centers in football?
Because Dan Campbell's motto, and we didn't bought into it, is next man up.
Antoine, I love Dan Campbell as much as the next guy. He doesn't get to. You can't just assume we're getting all pro production out of the position because Dan Campbell's the coach. I feel like that's silly.
That. I get that, but remember when Montgomery got hurt?
Yeah.
It was next man up. They put more of the workload on Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, we don't have a Jahmyr Gibbs playing center. I think that's the point.
I know, and I understand that, but we're talking about not skill positions, but more of a plug position.
See, but I think that's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. Like, we've highlighted how important the offensive line is for years, and we have talked about how great of a player Frank Ragnow is, not just in what he does in the run game, but identifying blitzes from a culture standpoint, being a gritty guy playing through injuries, for being a leader. We've praised this guy for years, and now he's gone, and we go, any old stiff can get plugged in. Dan Campbell's the coach, therefore we're going to be just fine.
I mean, well, you got to understand from a fan point of view, that's what's been going on. And we got our offensive line coach, Hank Bradley.
Yeah, great O-line coach.
He's ex-lineman, and he know how to mold them young players into being gritty.
I think he's very good, and I think he is definitely in the positive category when you're replacing 2 guys as starters up front that can get those guys to play at a high level for their abilities. Is it going to be at Frank Ragnow level? Probably not.
No. He is regarded as one of the two best O-line coaches in the game right now, the other one being in Philadelphia, Stoutland.
Right. And he did learn from, I think, one of the great teachers in the offensive line game, and that is Juan Castillo, who was his offensive line coach while he was at Philly. And so you pair that with, some of this is just, Hank being Hank and being good at what he does. Some of it is also you learn from those around you. We talk about Dan Campbell learning from Sean Payton. Hank Fraley learned from Juan Castillo. There is that factor of being able to develop young players to be good, but sometimes you just don't have a Pro Bowler, All-Proler to stick in there.
It's no disrespect to Hank Fraley. It's no disrespect to Mahogany or Ratledge, who is a rookie out of the box taking his first game snaps this season. They're not going to be Frank Ragnow. That's just okay to state that plainly. We don't have to twist ourselves into knots to say it's going to be there's a drop-off. This last guy still thinks they're one of the three best offenses in football.
Well, the one thing that he did say, and I know that schedules are not the same, but if we're going to talk about all of these different things as to why, Jared Goff can't be good or why this offense can't be good, you also have to say, when you say, hey, Jared Goff can't win on the road, well, where did the 3 losses come from last year?
Home. All of them.
And, he has proven that he can go into cold weather environments and get wins.
True.
Now, this year, it's going to be a little bit of a different task. It may be very different results. It's at Baltimore. It's at Cincinnati. It's at Kansas City. It's at Washington. At Philly. That's not an easy task.
Part of being the number one offense last year for Detroit, they put up 50 points in multiple games. They're not facing the Jags and the Titans this year.
No, but they face the Giants.
They play more good than bad. The schedule's harder than it was last year. I'm illustrating a point. They're going to face, we could do tit for tat on all this. They're going to end up with fewer 40 and 50-point games and more.
Most likely.
They're going to have less points, and it's going to push them down, whether Frank was here or not. Then I pull Frank out, and I think they're top 10, not top 5. But it's a healthy conversation. We got phone calls to get to. It's 97.1.